The rain had already soaked through my coat by the time I reached Ellis's front step, but I stood there for a moment longer, just listening to the low thrum of his television behind the door. I hadn't asked him for anything in years. Not after the wedding, not after the baby, not even after I lost my part-time cleaning job last winter. I had told myself I would never put him in a position to say no, but now I had no choice. He opened the door, still holding his phone thumb scrolling. He gave me a sideways look, then walked back inside without saying a word. I followed him in, dripping quietly onto the entryway tile. "Ellis," I said softly, "I need help. If I don't pay $680 by Friday, I'm out of the apartment." He didn't pause his scrolling, didn't even reach for the remote. "Figure it out," he said. "That's not my problem." The words weren't cruel. That almost made it worse. They were just automatic, like he'd filed me away somewhere in his mind underhandled and didn't see any reason to reopen the case. I stood there for another few seconds, the dampness from my coat beginning to seep into my shoulders. Dana walked past the hallway, gave me a glance but said nothing. Somewhere down the hall I could hear their daughter humming. I had brought soup. My hands were still curled around the bag. "I made your favorite," I murmured. Ellis gave a non-committal grunt. "Leave it on the counter." I placed it down gently, the plastic still warm. Then I turned and walked out, letting the door click shut behind me without another word. Outside, the rain had eased, but everything felt heavier. He hadn't even asked me why. 3 weeks ago, I had scratched off a ticket that changed everything. It had been a Thursday just before the end of the month. I'd picked up some instant noodles, a bag of rice, and a few cans of soup. At checkout, I had just enough left in my wallet for a scratch-off. One of the $5 ones with gold foil and a cheap promise of escape. I scratched it at the kitchen table under the dim light that flickered when the fridge kicked in. The numbers lined up slowly, 3 sevens, clean as daylight. At first, I thought I had read it wrong. I checked the back, then the website, then the numbers again. $7,200,000. I didn't scream. I didn't dance. I sat there with my fingers resting on the edge of the card, staring like it might vanish if I blinked. I was still sitting there when the phone buzzed. It was Ellis. Not to check on me. He was asking if I could bring over some of my casserole for Dana's sister's baby shower. I said yes. Of course I said yes. That night, I slid the ticket into the back of my drawer beneath my old voter registration card and the last birthday card Ellis had given me, unsigned, no message, just happy birthday in bold cursive. I didn't tell anyone. Not Ms. Harlow across the hall who sometimes knocked when her heat went out. Not my sister Jolene, who'd been trying to move out of her boyfriend's house for 5 years. And certainly not Ellis. I wanted to wait. Not to see who'd celebrate me when I was rich, but who would stand with me when I looked like I was falling apart. So I tested the water. One call, one visit, one small request at a time. Then came Sunday dinner. I wore the soft green cardigan, the one I'd saved for Ellis's graduation. It still smelled faintly of lavender, though the elbows were a little worn now. I arrived 10 minutes early, carrying sweet potatoes baked with brown sugar and a small tin of apple crisp. Dana greeted me with a distracted smile, already pouring wine into tall glasses. Ellis was on his phone, scrolling again. Always scrolling. We sat down around 6. The food was warm, the lighting soft, and I waited until the dishes had been passed and Dana's mother started talking about her vacation in Charleston. "I need to ask something," I said, setting my fork down. Dana looked up, glass already halfway to her lips. "I'm behind on rent. Not by much, just $680. I'll have it by next month, but I need help this time. Just a short loan. I'll pay you back." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Dana made a small sound, almost like a laugh, but tight and closed. She didn't bother to hide it behind her glass this time. You really should learn to live within your means, she said lightly, as if it were advice and not a slap. Ellis didn't say anything at all. He nodded slowly, like he agreed with her, but didn't want to say it out loud. I felt the warmth of the casserole dish still on the table. I'd made 2-1 for them to keep for the week. No one had said thank you. I folded my napkin carefully and placed it beside my plate. The food in front of me blurred at the edges. I didn't touch the apple crisp. After dinner, I rode the bus home in silence. That night, I took out a notebook from the drawer and drew a single line down the middle of the page. On one side, I wrote, "Who stood with me?" On the other, "Who stepped back?" Then I called Inez. I called Inez first. She was always the one who said, "We're more like sisters than cousins," especially when she needed something. Years ago, when her car broke down and her boyfriend left, I let her use mine for 6 months. Never asked for gas money. Never asked for a thank you. I just handed over the keys. Now her voice was warm, even cheerful. "Of course I want to help, Nida. Let me think. I can probably float you a few hundred. But I'll need it back by the 1st with a little interest just to cover myself. Say 30%." I held the phone a little tighter. "That's nearly 200 extra, Inez." She laughed. "Girl, you know how tight things are right now." I thanked her. Told her I'd let her know. Next was Marlon, my godson. I had stood at his christening, bought his first pair of dress shoes, mailed him a $50 bill every birthday through high school. He'd done well for himself real estate now, always posting photos of open houses and his new Audi. He took the call quickly, businesslike. "You're behind on rent," he said. "That's rough, auntie. Have you thought about liquidating a few things? You've got that old dining set, right? And maybe consider moving in with a roommate. I know a lady in Richmond with a spare room. She's older. Quiet, no pets? I'm not looking to sell my furniture," I said. "Just a little help to get through the month." "I get it," he replied. "But in this economy, we all gotta make sacrifices." I hung up feeling colder than when I called. Neither of them asked why. No one said, "Are you okay?" No one offered to stop by or bring anything. I turned the page in my notebook. 2 more names went under the wrong column. The next morning, Ellis called. The phone rang just after 9 while I was rinsing my teacup. I let it buzz once, twice, then picked up. Ellis didn't bother with small talk. "I talked to the landlord," he said. "He said he might be open to selling the building if the unit in 2C becomes available soon." I didn't say anything at first. I didn't need to. My breath had already gone shallow. "That's my unit, Ellis." He hesitated. "Right. I know. I just thought, if you're already behind, maybe it's time to think long-term. Get out of that bad situation." The words felt rehearsed, like someone else had suggested them and he'd memorized the lines. "I'm just trying to help," he added. Too quickly. I said thank you. I don't know why. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because saying nothing would have let my voice crack. After we hung up, I walked to the small desk by the window. I opened the top drawer and pulled out the thick envelope I'd placed there a week ago. Inside was a deed, my name on it. The entire building paid in full. I'd made the purchase quietly. No agents, no signs. Just a direct sale from the previous owner, an older man who had grown tired of managing tenants and wanted to retire to Arizona. He thought I was buying the unit to live in. He didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. Now I held the document in my hands, the official stamp still crisp at the corner. Ellis hadn't just refused to help me. He was planning for my absence. He wanted my door to close so he could pry a window open. I placed the deed back in the envelope, sealed it again, and slid it beneath a stack of newspaper coupons. That night, I knocked on Evelyn's door. I didn't call ahead. Evelyn didn't need notice. We'd lived in the same building for 17 years, and she always said real friends, knock, not schedule. I walked 2 blocks, then up 3 flights. My knees ached a little on the last set of stairs, but I didn't stop. I wasn't sure why I was going, not exactly. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to talk. I just needed to be somewhere that didn't expect anything from me. She opened the door in her slippers, eyes soft. "Nida," she said, stepping aside. "You look like you've been arguing with the sky." I smiled faintly. The sky won. We didn't talk much. We never had to. I sat in her worn chair by the window, the one with the blanket she knitted during her chemo. She poured tea, didn't ask what was wrong. She just watched me over the rim of her mug and nodded once like she already knew. After a while, she stood and shuffled over to the side drawer near her kitchen. She pulled out a small white envelope held together by a single paperclip. "I've been setting some aside," she said, placing it on the table in front of me. "It's not much. 700, maybe a little more. If you need it, it's yours." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat was tight. I stared at the envelope, the slight bulge of cash visible under the paper, the neat way she'd stacked it, counted. "It saved it. I don't need it," I finally said. "I know," she replied. She didn't ask why I'd come. She didn't need a reason to give. That was the thing with Evelyn. She helped because she wanted to, not because she expected something in return. I sat there until the tea turned cold. When I left, I didn't take the envelope. But I did take something with me. The next morning, I called Ellis. I called Ellis just after breakfast. My voice was steady. Not cold, not sharp, just quiet, like I'd already made peace with the thing I was about to say. "I've decided to move," I told him. "Would you help me file a quitclaim deed? I'll sign over my share of Grandma's house. No sense holding on to it if I won't be around." There was a pause on the other end. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Then his voice shifted. "Yeah," he said. "Of course. That makes sense." I could hear papers rustling in the background already. He scheduled the notary, said Dana would come too, and someone from his office just to make sure it's all smooth. I arrived early, dressed simple. They came in like they were walking into a closing deal. Dana in heels. The man from the office carrying a manila folder and a branded pen. The quitclaim deed sat at the top of the stack. "This will just take a second," Ellis said, flipping pages with a practiced air. "Then we'll get out of your hair." I nodded. I let them talk. I signed where they pointed. Handed them my ID. Took it back. Waited while the notary stamped each page with a mechanical, impersonal thunk. What none of them noticed, what they never even glanced at, was the second document I slid in beneath the quitclaim. Revocation of interest. It had my name, my address, and a single sentence: "I, Nida Ellison, hereby remove Ellis C. Ellison as a beneficiary to any future estate trust or inheritance of my person, effective immediately." It was notarized before they arrived. Ellis didn't read it. Neither did Dana. The man from his office skimmed the top line and nodded. The last signature they saw was mine. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. 2 weeks later, a letter was delivered to Ellis's apartment. 2 weeks went by quiet as snowfall. I kept my curtains drawn, made my tea, walked down to the corner for groceries. The city moved the same as it always had, even while something deeper in me began to settle. Then, late on a Thursday, Ellis called. He didn't start with hello. "What kind of petty move is this?" he snapped. "We got a notice. Says the building's been sold. New owner won't renew our lease. We have 60 days to vacate. Did you know about this?" I let the silence stretch for a moment. He'd filled so many of them lately, I thought he might finally hear himself in one. "I did," I said simply. "You did." His voice pitched higher. "So you knew and didn't say anything, just going to let us get kicked out." "That's low, Mom." He called me Mom then. He hadn't in weeks. Not since I asked for help. "I needed $680, I said quietly. "You gave me silence." There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause where truth settles. "Now you'll have time to think in yours," he cursed under his breath. Said something about Dana being furious about how the timing was terrible. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to clarify. He hung up before I could. I placed the phone down gently beside the stove and went back to slicing apples for a pie. Evelyn liked hers with extra cinnamon. Risa's little girl had asked if I'd show her how to braid dough like a basket. The building was changing. So was its sound. The next week, 4B filled with new laughter. I gave the keys to Risa on a Tuesday. She held them like they were something sacred. Not because they were gold-plated or fancy, but because they opened a door to a future she hadn't dared imagine 2 months ago. Unit 4B used to be Ellis's. The walls still had faint outlines, where Dana had hung her canvas Prince quotes about success and hustle that never matched the way she looked at people. Risa and her daughter Lila came with nothing but 3 suitcases and a plastic tub of folded blankets. Risa had left a marriage she shouldn't have survived. When she told me her story, she didn't cry. She spoke plainly, like she'd said it too many times to feel it anymore. I didn't ask for rent. I only asked that she water the houseplants in the hallway once a week. She agreed with a nod and eyes that shimmered just for a second. By March, the sound of the building had changed. Layla's laughter bounced through the stairwell after school. Evelyn brought over lemon muffins every Sunday, like clockwork, always saying, "2 for the little one, 1 for me." The hallway felt lived in again. Windows stayed open longer. There was music on the weekends, not arguments. The plants started blooming brighter than I'd ever seen them. And Ellis. He moved into Dana's brother's basement. I heard from someone at the corner store that he'd taken up part-time work while they figured things out. He hadn't called again. I didn't hold anger anymore, just space. I walked the building each morning with a quiet peace, checked the mailboxes, picked up flyers, watched Risa teach Layla how to tie her shoes in the lobby. One evening, I opened the safe at the back of my closet. I never said a word about the ticket, not to Evelyn, not to Risa, and certainly not to Ellis. There was power in the silence, a calm knowing that didn't need validation. The ticket stayed tucked in the back of my safe, inside a plain envelope marked with the date. Beneath it sat my will signed and witnessed. Neat handwriting, no drama, just decisions. Evelyn would get the building. She'd always loved it, like it was more than wood and brick. She understood what it meant to tend to something not for profit, but for people. Risa would receive a college fund for Layla. It wasn't just enough to cover tuition. It was enough to give them room to breathe, to live without the shadow of debt. I made sure of that. As for Ellis, he would get nothing. No keys, no instructions, no share. Just one truth to carry with him, that he was tested, and he failed. That may sound harsh to someone who's never had to watch their own child turn away, not out of struggle, but out of convenience. The kind of failure that doesn't come from lack, but from choice. I made tea that morning. The same kind Evelyn liked, peppermint with a bit of honey. I carried it to the window, the one that looked out over the hallway, where Layla sometimes danced between errands. Light was spilling in across the floor, soft and sure, warming the tiles that used to feel so cold. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just footsteps and laughter. A building full of women who'd learned how to keep going. I held the warm cup in both hands, feeling the quiet stretch wide around me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I felt done and free.